There's a moment, right after someone dies, when everyone goes quiet. Not out of respect. Not really. More like a pause, a beat where everyone's brain processes the loss, calculates the opportunity, and decides whether they're close enough to claim the boots. Because when you die on crusade, you don't take much with you. But the men around you? They take everything. You once watched a knight expire from an arrow to the throat. Before his last breath had even steamed into the cold air, two squires were already unstrapping his belt. One muttered something about divine inheritance. Another time, a cook passed in his sleep. By morning, 3 spoons, a knife, and half a sack of lentils had changed hands. A fourth man took his hat and claimed it fit him better anyway. You tell yourself it's tradition. That burying a man with his cloak, his pouch, his tiny carved figurine of Saint Bartholomew, it's all part of the ritual. A way of honoring his journey, his sacrifice. But really, it depends who's watching. If an officer's nearby, you fold the dead man's hands. Murmur a prayer. Pretend to brush dust from his face. Then, solemnly, you place his belongings beside him. For posterity. For purity. If no one's watching, you quietly slip the pouch into your own belt. Because it has salt. Or thread. Or 2 blessed coins that can buy twice as much soup if you trade them right. Sometimes they bury the body with everything still on it. You've seen men dig up the same grave days later. Just to check. But you understand. Because the dead don't need socks. And you do. Still, the fiction persists. It's what he would have wanted. Someone always says. To share with his brothers. And you nod because it sounds better then. He's not using this knife anymore. You once gave a eulogy. Short. Mumbled. You barely knew the man. You placed his rosary on his chest. It was broken. You kept the clasp. It worked better on your pouch anyway. Now, every time someone dies, you check your gear. Not out of fear. Just habit. Because here, in the land of heat and hunger, every item matters. Every thread. Every spoon. And while honor sounds nice in theory, survival is far more convincing. So when the next man falls, and someone inevitably mutters, "Let him be remembered," you'll nod. And keep your eyes on the boots. You hear it before you see him. A shrill, white squawk that could be a goose in agony. Or a very sick elephant. Or, unfortunately, the trumpet. It echoes through camp like divine mockery. Every morning. Every single morning. He plays at dawn. Not just a note. A song. A long, wavering, badly remembered tune that no one asked for and everyone suffers through. A melody that might once have been noble, some march of kings, but now sounds like someone trying to seduce a wounded duck with a tin funnel. And the man behind it? Trumpet guy. He's not even a soldier. He's technically part of the logistics staff. No one remembers who brought him. Some say he wandered into camp one night and never left. Others claim he was a noble's cousin. Either way, he has a horn and a divine sense of timing. Which is to say, terrible. He practices constantly. During meals. During prayers. During moments of quiet reflection where you're just trying to forget your trenched foot. Sometimes he plays during sermons. You once saw a priest twitch every time the trumpet let out a wheeze. And he doesn't just play music. He announces everything. New orders? Pipe. Soup's ready? Pipe. Someone sneezed too loudly? Triple pipe. It's gone to the point where no one listens to the actual officers anymore, just the pitch and duration of trumpet noises. A long blast? Probably something bad. A short toot? Soup, maybe. A series of sputtering honks. Someone sat on the bucket again. Everyone hates him, but no one stops him. Why? Because the trumpet guy has protection. Somewhere, somehow, he became the favorite of a high-ranking commander. Rumor says he once saved a captain's life, or gave someone the last clove of garlic during a particularly rough dinner. Or maybe it's just that no one wants to deal with the paperwork required to untrumpet a man. So he stays. And you suffer. You tried earplugs once. Cloth wrapped tight. Didn't help. You still felt the vibration in your teeth. You once begged a monk to curse him. The monk just crossed himself and muttered something about God's plan. You now dream in trumpet. You wake up screaming brass notes. And yet, somehow, he keeps going. Because out here, in the middle of dust and death, even the worst sounds are something. A reminder that you're still alive. That camp is still camp. That morning still exists, even if it arrives in the form of a flatulent fanfare. There's a map. You've seen it. Once. Held it in your hands for 7 seconds before a knight with a fancy feather took it back, muttering something about chain of command and greasy fingerprints. You never saw it again. But that was weeks ago. Now, you're somewhere. Definitely not nowhere. There are trees. Or maybe rocks. You saw a hill yesterday. Or was it a dune? Either way, the general direction is allegedly east. Allegedly. Every morning, someone declares, "We're nearly there." No one asks, "Where is there?" Because if you start asking questions, you have to admit something terrifying. No one knows where you are. You try to follow the sun. It moves. Unhelpfully. You try to remember landmarks. They all look the same. You try asking the locals, the 3 that haven't fled or screamed at your presence. They just point in vague arcs, say words you don't understand, and back away slowly. You once followed a goat for half a day. You were desperate. It looked like it knew what it was doing. It didn't. The commanders argue constantly. One wants to head toward the river. Another insists you passed that river already. A third says to follow the stars. But no one has seen a clear sky in 5 nights, thanks to the smoke and whatever that smell is near the latrines. And yet, the march continues. Because stopping is not an option. Stopping means admitting failure. Admitting the crusade isn't quite the neat, organized expedition it was sold as. That maybe, just maybe this path to Jerusalem is less a road and more a series of progressively worse guesses. The horses are no help. They look tired, confused. One walked straight into a tent yesterday and refused to come out. You envy that horse. You tried to backtrack once. Thought maybe you'd miss something. A signpost. A friendly village. A recognizable bush. After 3 hours, you ended up in the same place. Or at least a place that looked close enough that you pretended it was. There's comfort in pretending. So you keep marching. Somehow, impossibly, everyone pretends that this is fine. That all crusades involve a bit of scenic wandering. That it's part of the spiritual journey. That God will provide a sign. You're just hoping that sign has a proper name on it. And an arrow. And maybe a clean well. Because you're not technically lost. But no one, absolutely no one, knows where you are. No one brought him. That much is clear. He wasn't listed on any supply sheet. Didn't march in with the nobles. Didn't ride in with the supply wagons. He just showed up one morning, sitting beside the soup pot, staring at everyone with the quiet judgment of someone who has seen things. He has a name now, several actually. Some call him Rufus. Others say Jeffrey. A few claim his name is Saint Popward the Divine. You call him dog. He doesn't seem to mind. He's medium-sized. Brownish. Maybe black. Possibly part wolf. Definitely part rat. His tail is missing a chunk, his ears are asymmetrical, and one eye is clouded like he's storing secrets in it. He does not bark. He does not wag. He simply is. And somehow, over time, he's become the one thing that everyone respects. You've seen grown men part ranks to let him pass. Knights nod at him. Priests bless him. Once, a noble tried to kick him. The next morning, that noble's tent had been mysteriously relocated into a latrine pit. Coincidence? Maybe. But you don't mess with dog. He eats when he wants. Sleeps where he wants. You've seen him curl up on sacred relics, near fires, even in someone's helmet. No one moves him. Once a man tried. He left with a limp and a newfound fear of silent growling. He never begs. If he wants your food, he takes it. Quietly. With eye contact. You once offered him a chunk of bread. He sniffed it, sneezed, and walked away. You felt personally insulted. There's a rumor that he's been here longer than the war. That he's seen 3 crusades. That he's actually a cursed noble. Or a prophet. Or God's personal note-taker. You believe all of it. Because when the trumpet starts in the morning, dog does not move. When the monks chant too loud, he sighs and rolls over. When arrows fly, he disappears, then reappears, untouched, chewing something unidentifiable. He never fights. But when you lose a battle, he always looks at you like he knew it was coming. And in a camp full of confusion, lies, marching blisters, and decaying meat, dog makes sense. He doesn't promise salvation. He doesn't give orders. He just watches. And occasionally pees on your cloak. It started just after dusk. A few flecks of light, streaking across the sky, silent, sudden, strange. Someone pointed. Someone else gasped. A third man dropped his bowl and whispered, "We're all going to die." You looked up. The stars were falling. Not all at once. Not like a story. More like a slow, shimmering unraveling, bright lines cutting across the dark, like the heavens themselves were cracking open. You've seen strange things on this crusade. Men on fire. A goat give birth to something with 2 heads and 3 hooves. A monk speak in tongues after eating questionable mushrooms. But this was different. It felt cosmic. Around you the camp froze. Even the trumpet guy fell silent. For once, the bucket went unused. Even the camp dog sat up, stared at the sky, and gave a long, suspicious grunt. A knight dropped to his knees. Began confessing everything. Loudly. "I stole from a bishop," he sobbed. Twice. Someone else cried. Another laughed. One man sprinted naked into the woods, shouting something about the Holy Ghost riding a chariot of fire. No one stopped him. Honestly, it felt like the right move. You just stood there, mouth dry, trying to remember if this was one of the signs. The apocalypse had signs, right? Locust's blood, a beast or 2, but what about stars? Were they on the list? A priest mumbled about angels. A scribe started scribbling. A monk knelt in the dirt and began drawing circles and equations, which was both comforting and disturbing. The stars kept falling, bright tails vanishing into nothing, one after another. Someone screamed when a particularly large one broke into 5 pieces. You waited for thunder, for earthquakes, for something divine. Nothing came. Eventually, the sky calmed. The stars stopped falling. The wind returned. The fire crackled like normal. A man farted. And just like that, the world resumed. The moment passed. But something in the air had changed. A wait. A hush. The bishop gave a sermon the next morning, claimed it was a sign of God's favor, or wrath, depending on your sin count. No one really listened. You went back to marching. But that night, and every night after, you looked up a little longer. Just in case the stars decided to fall again. Just in case the sky remembered you. It looked fine. Slightly hard. Slightly green. But bread's supposed to be a little tough out here, right? You've eaten worse. Probably. You picked it up, gave it a sniff, and your nose reeled backward in protest. But you were hungry. So were they. All of them. You bit down. It didn't crunch. It squished. A deep, wet squish that should never come from anything made of flour. Someone across the fire gagged. Another man poked his loaf with a dagger, and it leaked. Bread should not leak. Someone said, "That's not mold. That's evolution." And that's when it started. Not a battle. Not a riot. Just discontent. The kind that simmers. The kind that starts with muttering and eye-rolling and ends with someone throwing a loaf at the quartermaster's tent like a soft, stale grenade. He came out. Red-faced. Furious. "You think this is easy? You think provisioning an army of imbeciles in sandals is fun?" He shouted, waving what might have once been a baguette like a scepter of shame. A knight demanded answers. A squire demanded toasts. Someone, maybe you, demanded new bread. The quartermaster told everyone to eat mud if they didn't like it. That's when the poem happened. A young man, face smudged with soot and pride, stood on a barrel and cleared his throat. He called it Ode to the Holy Loaf. It was terrible. It was glorious. It rhymed salvation with fermentation. You remember the first verse. All crust of sorrow, sponge of spite. You promised dinner, but birthed a blight. By the second verse, people were clapping. By the third, they were chanting. Someone held up their bread like a banner. Another tied his loaf to a spear and declared it a sacred relic. One man started weeping. You're not sure if it was from laughter or gastrointestinal regret. The bishop tried to calm things down with prayer. The trumpet guy tried to help with a dramatic fanfare. The camp dog ate a piece and immediately threw up. It lasted an hour. By the end, the quartermaster had barricaded himself inside his wagon. The baker claimed sabotage. The poem had 6 verses and was already being copied into someone's travel journal. No one was punished. Because technically, nothing happened. Except the bread. And the poem. And the memory. One night in the middle of mud war and madness, when everyone forgot to be angry, hungry, or scared, and just laughed. Even if their stomachs paid for it later. You smelled it first. A kind of burnt wool, charred canvas, and oh good heavens, is that a roasting boot kind of smell. Followed, as usual, by shouting. Not the usual kind, not. He stole my spoon. Shouting, or someone farted during mass. Shouting. Real shouting. You poke your head out of your tent. And there it is. Half the camp ablaze. Tents flapping in agony, smoke curling into the sky like a very confused offering, and a pot of someone's breakfast now bubbling unattended in a pile of ash. Fire licks the air. Someone's shouting for water. Someone else is just laughing. You blink. Then go back inside. Because at this point, who cares? It's not even surprising. After marching through plague, famine, monastic chanting, and a guy with trench fever trying to sell fake relics made of bone and pipe cleaner, a fire is normal. You heard it started because someone tried to cook in his tent. Again. despite all warnings, despite all experience, despite that one time a guy used oil, wine, and a torch at the same time and invented Crusader flambe. The quartermaster is yelling. Of course he is. He's pointing at things, holding a soggy book, screaming about inventory and insurance. A knight is flapping his cape at the flames like a heroic pigeon. It isn't working. One man tries to put the fire out with sand. Another uses soup. Someone throws their chamber pot. It sizzles. The smell changes. Everyone steps back. No one really fights the fire. They just sort of move around it. Adjust. Accept. Your tent is safe. For now. You think about helping. But then remember, your boots are off. Your socks are damp. Your water skin is half soup. And your neighbor's tent was mostly mold anyway. The fire dies eventually. Not from effort. Just boredom. 3 tents are gone. 1 chicken is missing. A handful of personal belongings now exist only in memory. And in the faint, greasy smoke still drifting lazily above camp. By sunset, no one's talking about it. Because it's just another day. Another item in the great tally of ridiculousness. Later that night, someone asks, "Remember that time half the camp caught fire?" Everyone nods. And nobody laughs. Because it's not even the worst thing that happened this week. It was half buried. Poking out of the dirt like an afterthought, glinting faintly in the early light, while you were digging yet another hole for yet another mysterious puddle of yet another man's shame. You almost missed it. But something about the shape made you pause. You reached down, brushed away the soil. The weight was right. The engraving, worn but visible. A cross, ringed with ancient script. Not Latin. Older. Hungrier. It felt important. You turned it over in your palm. Cool to the touch. Heavy in the way that holy things often are in stories. You didn't speak. You didn't shout. You just stared, while a dull throb started somewhere behind your eyes. You had found a relic. Not a fake. Not a goat tooth in a tin box. Not a spoon that someone claimed belonged to St. Peter. A real one. You stood slowly. Looked around. And that's when you made your mistake. You told someone. He laughed. "Sure," he said, snorting. "And I've got St. Matthew's sandals in my sock." You showed it to him. He squinted. He shrugged. "Looks like a coin," he said. "From a donkey." The next man said it was cursed. The next said it was lunch. The priest took one look and accused you of heresy, then tried to buy it. For the good of the church. By midday, half the camp had weighed in. One guy claimed it was an old belt buckle. Another said it was part of a Saracen war drum. One very specific scribe insisted it matched a design commonly found on soup lids in 403 AD. You tried to defend it. You pointed at the markings. The weight. The feeling. That strange hum in your chest like distant thunder or indigestion. No one listened. So you stopped trying. You wrapped it in cloth, tucked it away. You still don't know what it is. But it feels real. More real than most things out here. Every night, when the fires die and the camp quiets, you take it out. Not for prayer. Not for glory. Just to hold it. To remember that for one brief, absurd moment, you found something sacred in a world that smells mostly like chorus and regret. And no one believed you. But that's alright. You believe. And that's enough. You've thought about it a lot. Not death. Survival. Because somehow, against all odds, through plague and bad stew and that one time someone mistook saltpeter for flour and everyone learned what a violent expulsion really meant, you're still here. You shouldn't be. The numbers don't make sense. You've seen healthier men drop dead from coughs. Stronger fighters cut down by archers who barely aimed. Smarter men outwitted by their own ambition and or expired sausage. But you? Still standing. Barely. Your armor hangs like a borrowed coat. Your boots have more holes than leather. Your skin has developed calluses in places you didn't know had nerves. You've been stabbed. Bruised. Burned. Once bitten by something that hissed and may or may not have spoken Latin. You limp more than you walk. You sleep less than you blink. You've forgotten entire weeks. But somehow, you're not dead. You'd like to think it's skill. That your instincts are sharp, your reactions quick, your grit unmatched. But if you're honest, it's mostly luck. Dumb, stubborn, accidental luck. You zigged when you should have zagged. You ducked for a dropped spoon right before a spear flew by. You were too sick to join that doomed assault. You took the left path instead of the right, which led to soup instead of slaughter. You've become a rumor. Newer recruits point at you. Whisper. That one? They say. He's cursed. Or blessed. Or both. You don't correct them. You let them believe what they want. Because you don't have an explanation. You just keep going. One foot after the other. One day after the next. You drink the water. Eat the questionable meat. Bandage the same blister for the 6th time. And you keep walking. You've stopped asking why. Stopped wondering how. Because if you think too hard about it, the universe might notice you're overdue. So instead, you focus on smaller things. The warmth of a fire. The crunch of bread that isn't actively rebelling. The soft sound of rain on your tent. The camp dog curling against your leg like he owns the place. He does. You breathe. You exist. You endure. Not because you're special. Not because you were chosen. But because somehow, inexplicably, you're still here. You see the city on the horizon. At first, it doesn't feel real. Just another mirage. Another false hope conjured by too much sun, too little food, and exactly 0 functional toenails. But then someone beside you gasps, really gasps, and drops their shield. It is real. Stone walls. High towers. The distant shimmer of sunlight bouncing off something too golden to be natural. You can smell it, almost, the dust, the incense, the ancient weight of it. Jerusalem. The word used to taste like honey. Now it just tastes like salt and fatigue. You made it. You don't know what that means anymore. Whether it's a blessing, a victory, or just another checkpoint on an infinite road paved with pain and goat-scented regret. But you made it. Some men cheer. Others fall to their knees. A few just collapse, too tired to celebrate, too shocked to move. You feel nothing. Or maybe too many things at once. Your body aches. Your soul feels like a stretched-out bootlace. You haven't cried in months. You consider it now. There's no parade. No trumpets. Okay, there's one trumpet, but even he sounds tired. No heavenly choir. No doves. Just alone, dusty approach and the knowledge that you left pieces of yourself on every step of this journey. You've changed. Not in the way they promised. You're not holier. You're not cleaner. You're not redeemed. You're just aware of how thin the veil is between life and death, of how absurd it is to chase glory in the form of rusted armor and spoiled bread, of how every man who marched beside you and didn't make it left a gap no relic can fill. You walk through the gates. No one stops you. Inside markets, temples, people. Some stare. Some ignore you. Some run. You don't blame them. You smell like despair and dried fish. You're given no speech, no sermon, no thanks, just a bed. And for the first time in what feels like 100 years, you sleep. When you wake, the city is still there. But you're not the same. You'll never be the same. You carry the weight of those you buried. The songs you heard. The trench jokes. The taste of boiled boot leather. The relic no one believed in. The trumpet that refused to die. The one-eyed liar. The bucket. Especially the bucket. You survived the crusade. But survival isn't the same as returning. You will go home one day. And when people ask, "What was it like?" you'll smile softly and say, "You had to be there. Thank you for marching with me." If you made it to the end, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And hey, before we go, I'll ask again. Where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are right now? Because I know that you, me, and everyone else tuned into this video, we all share the same little habit. Even if we're scattered across the world, far from one another. Tonight, we're going on a journey. Not the peaceful, candlelit kind where you drift off in a comfy robe listening to the rain. No, tonight, you're marching toward Jerusalem. And spoiler, it's going to smell like feet. You've heard the stories before, haven't you? Of brave knights with polished swords, banners waving, riding valiantly into the Holy Land. Maybe you pictured gold crosses and noble quests, heroic hymns echoing through the stone halls of Christendom. But here's the thing they left out: trench foot, lice, absolute, spirit-breaking dysentery. And that's just breakfast. Because tonight, you're not just watching history. You are history. You are a crusader. Which sounds exciting, sure, until you realize that you have no idea what you're doing. You can read. You're wearing armor that smells like mildew and regret. You're walking, always walking. Your only meal today is a handful of salted pork so old it technically predates sin. And you're not even sure where Jerusalem is. You've just been following the guy ahead of you who also has no clue. He's mostly marching because someone promised indulgences and a slightly better afterlife. Still awake? Good. Because you won't be for long. The march is endless, the sun is unforgiving, and your shoes? Well, let's just say, shoe is a generous word for that bundle of stitched cowhide and mud now suctioned to your foot like a second, smellier skin. But I want you to relax now. Seriously. Let your shoulders drop. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan to simulate the hot desert breeze. Or a moldy medieval tent flapping beside your ear. Whatever works. The idea is to drift, not just into sleep, but into 1096 AD. Forget your phone. Forget toothpaste. Forget personal hygiene. You're about to wake up on a bedroll surrounded by other unwashed zealots who snore like pigs and pray like fanatics. They're not mutually exclusive. This is not a history lecture. This is not a travel brochure for ancient warfare. This is your new, slightly cursed bedtime story. It's about what life really looked like when you joined the First Crusade, and why, despite all the valor, the vows, and the vaguely holy intentions, you probably wouldn't survive more than a single, miserable, God-forsaken day. And honestly, that's okay. Because by the end of this journey, you're going to love your mattress a little more. You'll never look at clean socks the same way again. And the next time your Wi-Fi cuts out, you'll remember what it felt like to drink from a communal bucket swarming with mosquito larvae. So if you find yourself dozing off midway through the sound of coughing monks and swearing knights, that's the goal. But before we dive into today's story, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are right now? Because I know that you, me, and everyone else tuned into this video, We all share the same little habit, even if we're scattered across the world, far from one another. If you genuinely enjoy this kind of sleepy descent into dark corners of the past, feel free to like, subscribe, share, or leave a comment with your time zone below. Or don't. I'm not your medieval commander. I won't flay you for insubordination. But now, close your eyes, and let's begin. Your eyes open slowly, and you're not sure at first if they've opened at all. It's pitch black, not the cozy, candlelit kind of dark, but the kind of black that smells like moldy wool and feet. Your first breath of the morning tastes like iron, sweat, and despair. Congratulations. You've just woken up on the ground outside of Antioch, and the good news is, you're not dead. The bad news is, everything else. You're lying on a piece of damp cloth that qualifies as a blanket only in the loosest possible sense. It's stiff with old sweat and you suspect someone else's old cough. The ground beneath you is hard-packed dirt, half frozen from the cold desert night. Your spine has filed an official complaint, but it was denied by the papal bull of suck it up. You try to sit up, and a sharp cramp bites your side like an angry squirrel. That's just your kidneys reminding you they haven't processed anything that isn't saltwater pork and fear in 3 weeks. Around you, dozens of other crusaders snore like dying donkeys. One of them mutters something about demons in his sleep. Another coughs. You flinch instinctively, because here, a cough isn't just a cough. It's a coin flip between mild phlegm and actual plague. The sun isn't up yet, but the smell is. Oh, the smell. It's a cocktail of unwashed bodies, old leather, dried blood, and something you're pretty sure is foot rot. Medieval hygiene, in case you were wondering, is basically a group experiment in how long can you go without touching water before your body starts rebelling? The answer, apparently, is about 3 weeks ago. You squint at your boots. They're not where you left them. You find one beneath your neighbor's armpit. The other is currently home to a rat. The rat glares at you like you're the intruder. You consider just going barefoot. Then you remember the latrine pit you stumbled into last night and decide against it. There's shouting in the distance. Some commander barking orders. Or maybe just screaming at God again. It's hard to tell. Either way, it's your wake-up call. Not a gentle chime. More like a curse-laced reminder that today, like every day, is going to hurt. You put on your armor. Or rather, you attempt to. The chainmail feels heavier than it did yesterday. Probably because your muscles are busy digesting themselves. You smell something metallic and sweet. Is that blood? Probably. Is it yours? Unclear. Everything hurts anyway, so it's hard to tell the difference. You strap on your belt, your dagger, your cross pendant, as if that's going to help, and step into the morning mist, where death waits patiently behind every bush, every clouded breath, every overly friendly monk. This is your life now, and you've only just woken up. You need to go. And not in the casual, modern sense of, I'll just pop to the restroom. No. This is the kind of urgent, full body pressure that reminds you your entire diet yesterday consisted of hard bread, half-cooked lentils, and water from a puddle that smelled faintly of goat and death. The problem is, there is no restroom. There's barely privacy. You are one of thousands of crusaders, many of whom have already decided the world is their toilet. You pass one man hunched over behind a bush. He locks eyes with you while still mid-process. No shame. Just war. Eventually, you find what counts as the designated latrine zone, a shallow pit someone dug last week. It's full now. Full and layered. The smell hits you like a divine punishment. It's thick, humid, and somehow both sour and burning, like a hot cheese left in a wine barrel. You pick a spot not because it looks clean, but because it looks slightly less cursed. You squat. You try not to breathe. You fail. A fly lands on your cheek. You sweat it. 5 more arrive. It's a buffet. You glance around nervously, trying to preserve some dignity, which is hilarious, because dignity left this camp months ago. Still, you wait until the man next to you finishes his business and stands up, using the edge of his tunic, casually, as toilet paper. You suddenly miss moss. Or a leaf. Or your childhood. You finish, and now comes the truly medieval moment, cleaning. There are options, if you're generous with the word. A smooth rock. A bit of cloth you could risk tearing from your hem. A handful of dry grass that looks scratchy. You remember hearing someone use their left hand once. You never shook his hand again. Eventually, you settle on doing what most do. Absolutely nothing. Just pull up your pants and pretend it didn't happen. You'll deal with the consequences when the rash appears. You step away, carefully, avoiding puddles that shimmer ominously. And as you walk back, it occurs to you, this wasn't the worst part of your day. Not even close. It was just the beginning. Somewhere up ahead, the horn is sounding. That means movement. Another day of marching, fighting, starving, and praying. Maybe all 4 at once. You tighten your belt, take a breath through your mouth, and steel yourself. Because being a crusader isn't about glory. It's about gastrointestinal resilience. Breakfast. The most important meal of the day. Except here, it's more of a gamble than a meal. A mystery wrapped in disappointment, served lukewarm and occasionally still moving. You trudge toward the fire pit, if you can call a blackened patch of ash and burnt sticks a fire pit. The smell of smoke lingers, thick and choking, not in a cozy campfire way, but in a who just threw hooves into the fire sort of way. There's a pot hanging over the embers. It's not boiling. It's barely steaming. Inside is something that might once have been food. It's a slurry, a thick beige gruel with floating flecks of brown that you pray are barley and not insect parts. A crust forms on top, because it was reheated from yesterday, and the day before, and possibly the day before that. No one's sure anymore. The pot has a smell that would make a corpse blush. You clutch your wooden bowl. It's not really your bowl. You found it abandoned weeks ago, and no one's challenged you for it. Probably because of the mold on the rim. The man ladling the gruel doesn't make eye contact. He just slops a half scoop into your bowl with a dull splat and moves on. You sit on a rock to eat. Not because it's comfortable, nothing is, but because it's not the dirt. The spoon you use is, let's say, shared. You wipe it off with your sleeve, which is already crusted with previous meals and one unfortunate incident involving pigeon droppings. You raise the spoon to your mouth. The texture is indescribable. Somehow slimy and dry at the same time. Like cold glue mixed with gravel. It tastes of nothing. No salt. No spice. Just starch and regret. You chew, but you don't know why. It's not chewy. It's more like yielding. Like a food giving up before you do. Someone nearby coughs, and a glob of something lands in their bowl. They eat it anyway. You pretend not to notice. There's some talk of meat. Someone claims they saw a piece of pork in the pot yesterday. Others say it was a rat. Either way, it's none in your bowl. You sit the last of your portion, and it's already cold. It's also gritty. You crunch down and realize you've just bitten into a pebble. Or a tooth. You don't ask whose. As you scrape the bottom, hunger gnaws at you harder than ever. But you're done. And so is your stomach, for now. You lick your spoon clean, because calories are calories. You stand. Lightheaded. Dizzy. ready to march for hours on foot toward a city you've never seen, for a cause you barely understand, led by men who've already lost their maps. Your stomach rumbles again. It's not satisfied. But then again, it hasn't been since you left home. You try not to think about it, but something's crawling. Somewhere beneath your tunic, between your shoulder blades, just below the edge of your linen undergarments, if we're still calling them that, something with legs is making itself at home. Probably a louse. Could be 10. You stopped counting days ago. You give a little shake, as discreetly as you can, and feel the brief, terrible movement of something dislodging, only to resettle slightly lower. Welcome to Crusader fashion. It's less armor of God, more itchy sackcloth cosplay. Your underclothes, that linen tunic clinging to your skin like a wet rag, haven't been washed in weeks. Neither have you. It's hard to tell where the cloth ends and the sweat-stained salt crust begins. And the smell? Picture an armpit wrapped in wool, left on a windowsill for a week, and then slapped with garlic. It's that. It's exactly that. You tug on your outer tunic, a coarsely woven wool thing that was probably white once. Now it's beige-gray-brown, with patches darker where the filth has become structural. On top of that goes your chainmail, which weighs more than your hopes for the day. It's cold. It's rusty. It bites into your shoulders like an angry iron corset, and it smells like blood, metal, and last week's sweat stew. Then come the shows, basically chainmail leggings that chafe in every imaginable place, and several you'd never imagined before. You attempt to tie them, fail, try again, and eventually give up and just hope they won't fall off mid-charge. You strap your belt around your waist, slide your dagger into its sheath, and pick up your helmet, which is less protection and more iron oven for your brain. The inside is padded with old cloth and dried sweat. When you put it on, it hugs your head like a suffocating handshake. And yes, it still smells better than your boots. Speaking of boots, they're less like shoes and more like what leather sacks nailed to your feet. You tie the thongs, feel the shift of something squishy near your heel, and make a mental note to check for rot later. Right now, there are more important things, like staying alive, or not scratching too obviously. You glance at your fellow crusaders. They look just like you, miserable, filthy, itching, and pretending they're still on some kind of holy adventure instead of an unwashed, but riddled death conga line. A man to your left picks a tick off his ankle and flicks it without breaking stride. You feel something shift again under your tunic. You don't scream. You just scratch and carry on. That's the Crusader way. There's no map. Well, there was a map. Once. It was hand-drawn by a monk who never been more than 12 miles from his village and thought Jerusalem was somewhere east of Constantinople, near the "Here be dragons" margin. He also spelled it Jerusalem, and thought Armenia was a kind of cheese. So no, there's not a real map. What there is marching. Always marching. Every morning, like a disorganized parade of rotting hope, you and thousands of other crusaders strap on your packs, grip your spears, adjust your armor, and trudge forward, mostly because the guy in front of you is also trudging forward. And because if you stop, someone might assume you're dead and steal your boots. Again. The road, if you can even call it that, is a mix of mud, dust, and horse droppings. Mostly horse droppings. Sometimes it's wide enough for cuts. Sometimes it's a goat path hugging the edge of a cliff. Once it was just a dried-up riverbed filled with sharp rocks and the occasional very confused camel. Your feet hurt. But not in the long day at the office way. More like the someone balled your toes, glued gravel to them, and then forced you to walk on them until you begged for death kind of way. Each step sends a jolt through your legs and into your spine, which crackles like old parchment. And you still got miles to go. The sun climbs higher. It does not care. It's a pitiless yellow orb that sears your face, boils your helmet, and makes the stink of thousands of sweaty men waft and swirl like accursed incense. You taste salt on your lips, not from the sea, but from your own evaporated tears and regret. Someone starts singing a hymn. It's off-key and sad. It trails off after 3 verses because no one remembers the words and everyone's too tired to pretend. You pass a dead meal. Or maybe it's a night. Hard to tell with the flies. Every now and then you pass a village. Most of them are empty. The peasants ran off weeks ago when they saw the crusade coming. Those who stayed behind charge outrageous prices for stale bread and thin wine. Sometimes they just throw rocks. You keep walking. For hours. For days. The landscape changes from rolling hills to scrubby plains to jagged rocks and thorn bushes. Still no sign of Jerusalem. Or really, of anything. Just the endless sound of feet dragging through filth, armor clanking, stomachs growling, and someone always coughing. You march because it's all you know how to do now. You march because if you stop, you'll start thinking. And if you start thinking, you'll realize how badly this all sucks. You are thirsty. Not. I could use a glass of water. Thirsty. No, you are lips cracked, tongue swollen, eye sockets dry thirsty. The kind of thirsty where your dreams have started featuring fountains, and you'd consider licking the condensation off someone's armor. If there were condensation. If there were water. But there isn't. The canteen you carry was full once. Back in France? Or maybe Italy? Hard to remember. Now, it holds a few hot droplets that taste like metal and old leather. You tip it to your mouth anyway. 1 drop hits your tongue. It's warm. It vanishes instantly. Still, you cling to it like it's holy relic water. You've seen others trade entire meals for a swallow. Or sell off a belt for half a ladle of stream water. You once watched a man drink from a puddle left by a horse, then vomit, then try again. Water is a luxury now. A miracle. And it doesn't come from clean, bubbling springs. It comes from wells that smell like rust and regret. It comes from muddy holes trampled by oxen. It comes, sometimes, from rivers that look more brown than blue and taste faintly of manure. When the crusade started, there were water bearers. Organized. Some wagons even carried barrels. But those were the early days, the optimistic phase of the holy mission, when people still believed God would provide. Now the barrels are dry. The wagons are broken. The water bearers either dead, missing, or charging 3 days' rations for a bucket that may or may not include algae. You pass a fellow crusader passed out on the side of the road. His lips are white. His skin is red. He's breathing barely. Someone pours wine into his mouth. It dribbles down his chin. Not because he's weak, but because that's all they had. And wine is what most people drink now. Not because it's safe, but because it's not actively trying to kill you via bacteria. Well, not immediately. Plus, it numbs the stomach cramps a little. You wonder how much water is left. For the army. For the animals. For the mission. Then you remember that thinking is dangerous, and the only thing worse than thirst is despair. Someone yells, "Water! Up ahead!" A spring maybe? A trickle from a rock? A cruel joke? Everyone rushes forward, shoving and slipping in the dust. You follow instinctively, breath catching in your throat. And then you see it, a tiny stream, barely more than a dribble, hidden between 2 rocks. Already 5 people are face down in it. A 6th is drinking from his boot. You hesitate for exactly 1 second. Then you drop to your knees, plunge your face into the stream, and drink like an animal. It tastes like mud and feet and something vaguely decayed. You don't care. It's wet. And for now, that's enough. You wake up with a cough. That's never a good sign. Not here. Not now. Because in the Crusader camp, coughing doesn't mean a cold. It means you've been blessed. Not by God. No, he's far too busy. But by something smaller, sneakier, and far less forgiving. Congratulations. You've been selected for trial by pestilence. You tried to keep it quiet at first. Just a soft HHRM into your sleeve. But it scratches deep. It's dry, rasping, and it won't go away. You shift and your back aches. You're sweating. But you're cold. Fantastic. That's fever territory. One of the 4 horsemen has probably just laced up his boots. You glance around. Someone nearby is already dead. You think. He hasn't moved since yesterday, and the flies are unusually interested. No one's bothering to check. It's safer not to. We've all seen what happens when you poke a corpse too soon. Sometimes it doesn't stay still. You're not alone though. Everyone's sick. Or has been sick. Or will be sick soon. It's the one unifying part of Crusader life. You can read. You don't know where you are. But you do know dysentery. There's no real medicine. There's wine. There are prayers. And if you're lucky, a poultice made from herbs someone found near the camp latrine, which feels suspicious on every level. You once saw a monk bleed a man who had the chills. Said it would balance the humors. The man died, but his humors were extremely balanced by the end. Most ailments here come with vague names. The sweats. The flux. Camp fever. The bloody cough. If it ends with you shaking on the ground, covered in filth, and breathing like a drowning fish, it's probably just the flux. Lice are constant. They're your loyal companions, really. They go where you go. They love you for your warmth, your blood, and your unwillingness to bathe. You've stopped bothering to pick them off. There are always more. Then there's trench foot. Because when you march through swamps and soggy boots filled with bits of toe from the last owner, bad things happen. Your skin goes soft, then gray, then black, and then bits start falling off like particularly unpopular party guests. Someone nearby is hacking violently now. You flinch. It's not the cough itself, it's the sound of others backing away. Like birds scattering before a storm. You pull your cloak tighter. It does nothing. It smells like mildew and goat. You are ill. You know this. You feel it in your bones. In the shallow, aching breath in your lungs. In the dizziness that hits when you stand too fast. In the way your stomach groans like a haunted drum. But you keep moving. Because if you stop, the camp forgets you. And the flies remember. So, you're sick. That's established. And now comes the worst part, help. Because when you finally collapse, wheezing and pale and clutching your stomach like it's about to betray you, they don't leave you alone. No. Someone decides to summon the camp healer. And that's when things get truly medieval. He arrives smelling of onions, dried sage, and something sharp you can't quite place. Probably despair. He's got a robe that used to be white, but is now a patchwork of browns and reds, and you'd rather not think about what those reds might be. His face is serious. Too serious. He touches your forehead with the back of his hand like he knows what he's doing. Then he mutters something about imbalanced humors, which is the medieval equivalent of, have you tried turning it off and on again? Diagnosis complete. He rummages to a sack filled with twigs, leaves, and questionable roots. He pulls out a lump of something squishy, wraps it in a rag, and presses it to your chest. It smells like feet and vinegar. You ask what it is. He tells you it's good against wind spirits. Of course it is. Next comes the bloodletting. You try to protest, but your words are weak. He says it's necessary. That your humors are probably angry, possibly melancholic, and definitely out of whack. He pulls out a knife. Not a clean one. Not a new one. Just a knife. You flinch. He mutters a prayer. Then he cuts. It stings. It bleeds. He holds a filthy bowl under your arm as you drip life into it. You stare at the bowl and wonder how much blood you're allowed to lose before it becomes a problem. He tells you this is helping. You nod, mostly because your vision's starting to blur. Then he gives you a concoction to drink. It's brown. It's chunky. And it moves slightly. You take one sip and gag. It tastes like earth, copper, and something that might once have been worm. You ask what's in it. He says, whatever the Lord provided. You ask what that means. He doesn't answer. The remedy works, technically, because you stop noticing your original symptoms entirely. Now that your throat is on fire, your stomach is churning, and your nose is bleeding for absolutely no reason. Later, a passing priest blesses you. He sprinkles holy water. Some lands on your arm. It burns. Could be the infection. Could be the herbs. Could be divine disapproval. Who knows? By nightfall, you're still alive. Barely. Covered in bandages that smell like moldy cheese, with leeches wriggling in a jar beside your bedroll. Just in case. But the healer seems pleased. He says you're lucky, that others died faster. You try to smile. Your teeth hurt. You've got a sword. At least, that's what the man who gave it to you called it. Technically, it's a long, rust-flecked chunk of iron with a handle that smells like foot sweat and has definitely seen better centuries. The edge is blunt. The point is chipped. If you swing it hard enough, it might hurt someone. If you drop it, it'll definitely hurt your own foot. But hey, it's yours. A real knight now, right? You slide it into your scabbard, which squeaks ominously. The leather's cracked. It was made for a different sword. You have to wiggle it in sideways, like you're tucking a fish into a sack. It sticks. You don't care. It looks impressive from a distance. In fog. At night. Now for armor, which is less protective and more decorative suffering. Your chainmail shirt weighs as much as a sheep and smells worse. It drapes over you like damp seaweed, chafing at the neck, underarms, and thighs. Every step you take grinds the links into your skin like metallic sandpaper. After a few miles, your shoulders feel like they're hosting 1,000 angry ants with tiny, righteous swords of their own. You've got a helmet too, a thick iron kettle that traps heat like a bakery oven and muffles sound so well you can't hear anything except your own wheezing. You tried patting it once with rags. The rags molded. You use them anyway. Your shield is a wooden plank painted with a faded red cross. It's been dented, cracked, and patched so many times it creaks when you lift it. It blocks arrows. Sometimes. It also blocks your vision, airflow, and hope. There's also a dagger on your belt. It's short, rusty, and not particularly sharp. Mostly useful for spreading dubious meat onto crusty bread, or threatening rats for sleeping space. And yet, despite all of this, you feel like a crusader. You're armored, armed, ready. Or at least, you look slightly more threatening than the barefoot man with a stick standing next to you. You give him a nod. He nods back. His stick has a nail in it. It's probably more effective than your sword. You march past tents full of other soldiers polishing weapons that gleam in the sun, the real knights, with their polished armor and plumed helms and horses that don't look like they're about to die of shame. You envy them. You also smell better than them, somehow, which is confusing and tragic. Someone asks if you're ready for battle. You want to say yes. But your armor is pinching your armpit, your sword is stuck halfway out of its scabbard, and your helmet is slowly rotating sideways on your head like a confused pot lid. You settle for a thumbs up. The universal symbol for, I'll probably die first, but let's pretend. It's time. Or so they say. Honestly, time is a loose concept now, somewhere between after breakfast and before God smites us all. But the horn's blown, the commander is yelling, and someone just threw up from nerves, so yes, it's battle time. You tighten your belt. Not because it helps. Just because everyone else is doing it. The entire army is assembling into what could generously be described as a formation, and more accurately as a mob with a flag. The sun is already brutal, climbing into the sky with a smug, golden leer. Your helmet traps the heat like a bakery oven for your scalp. Your sweat has nowhere to go, so it just pulls, soaking your collar, your back, your everything. The air smells like iron, leather, and the stomach-turning tang of fierce sweat. That and onions. Why is it always onions? You glance to your left. A boy no older than 14, gripping a spear twice his height and blinking rapidly, trying not to cry. To your right, a man with a missing nose mutters scripture under his breath, then spits into the dirt. He's carved a cross into his shield. And also, possibly into his chest. The commander rides ahead, yelling something about righteousness and victory. You hear every third word. Something something holy duty. Something something the infidel. Something something glory. No one's listening. Everyone's watching the horizon. You spot movement, figures in the distance. Armor glinting. Flags fluttering. And suddenly, everything inside you clenches. You are not ready. No one is. The men around you shift, swallow, adjust their grips on weapons they barely know how to use. A drummer begins a slow beat. Boom. 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 Your heart tries to sync with it, fails, and races ahead. The smell changes. More sweat. And something else. Something sharp and metallic. The scent of blood, carried on the wind like a warning. You march. Not in step. Not proudly. Just forward. The chainmail tugs at your shoulders. The shield bangs against your leg. Your sword is already sticking. The sun reflects off your helmet, temporarily blinding you. You consider turning around. You don't. The ground shakes faintly beneath your boots. Whether it's your imagination or the real thunder of hooves, you can't tell. You just know that the next few minutes will probably decide whether you live, or become another bloated cautionary tale rotting in the sun. The line stops. You grip your sword tighter. Your fingers are trembling. You try to focus. The man beside you vomits quietly and wipes his mouth with his sleeve. Then the horn sounds again, and you charge. Or, more accurately, you stumble forward in a loud, chaotic mess of screaming, sweating, clanging humanity, hurtling toward death and destiny, hoping that maybe, just maybe, you can swing your dull sword before someone with a sharper one finds your ribs. Battle begins, not with a trumpet, but with screaming. You'd imagine something more elegant, banners flapping, swords gleaming, a poetic clash of ideals under the sun. What you get is a roar, like 1,000 angry cattle colliding with a thunderstorm. You run forward, half blind in your helmet, feet tripping in the churned-up mud, armor clanking like a dying cooking pot. And then you hit. It's not like the stories. There's no clean, theatrical swordplay. No dramatic pauses or noble duels. Just the overwhelming crush of bodies, a sweaty, snarling wall of men hacking at each other with anything they can hold. You raise your sword. It immediately bounces off someone's shield and nearly flies out of your hand. You swing again, wildly, and feel the dull, unsatisfying thud of metal on armor. Maybe you hit someone. Maybe it was a tree. Honestly, you're not sure. Your shield jerks violently. A spear glances off it with a horrible crack. Your entire arm goes numb. The air is filled with noise, shouting, clashing, the wet slap of flesh being potted from bone. It smells like blood and dirt, and something you hope isn't someone's intestines. It is. You stumble, barely keeping your balance. Someone slams into your back. You nearly fall. You look down and see a man on the ground, clutching his leg, which is barely attached anymore. He's screaming. You move away. You do not help. You cannot help. You duck a mace. It misses by inches. You feel the wind of it pass by and know that if it had connected, your brain would currently be soup. You slash at someone. He turns. His face is as terrified as yours. You both pause for a moment, acknowledging that neither of you knows what you're doing. Then he lunges. You scream and jab your sword blindly. It hits something soft. He screams. You don't look. There is no direction. No order. Just panic and steel. Your boot slips on something, someone. You fall. Your helmet slams against the ground. The world rings. The sun flickers. You see feet rushing past, kicking up mud and blood. You scramble, grabbing at grass, at corpses, anything. You rise somehow. Your sword is gone. You don't remember dropping it. You grab a fallen spear. It's sticky. You don't ask why. You thrust it forward, shrieking like a man who wants to live. It hits something. You feel resistance. Then give. Then wetness. The spear stays in. You let go. You stagger back, heart thudding so hard you're sure it's going to eject itself. Then suddenly, just as quickly, it's over. Or at least paused. Your side is yelling in victory. Or maybe in relief. Or maybe just to stay conscious. The enemy retreats. You stand shaking, filthy, bleeding from somewhere, but alive. You don't feel victorious. You feel hollow. The battlefield is quiet now. Well, not quiet exactly. More like a chorus of moans, the flutter of torn banners, the clink of looted buckles, and the occasional scream from someone who didn't die cleanly enough. The air hangs heavy with heat, dust, and that unmistakable scent, blood, excrement, sweat, and something sweetly sour that you now recognize as death, freshly unwrapped. You stand among the fallen. Some are groaning, barely moving. Others are still, eyes open, staring into nothing. A man near your feet is muttering a prayer, or maybe a curse. You step over him. Gently. But still. This is the part they never talk about in the sermons. The part after the battle, when the victors pick through the remains like starving crows. Not for mercy. For stuff. Looting. You hesitate at first. You were told this was a holy war, about faith, redemption, eternal glory. But that man over there just pulled the silver ring from a dead man's hand and is now chewing on dried fruit he found in the same corpse's pouch. A knight nearby lifts a blood-soaked purse from what used to be a foot soldier and laughs. "Found my dinner!" he shouts. You're not sure if he means the money or the actual contents. You tell yourself you're just looking for supplies. It's survival, not greed. That man over there? He doesn't need his boots anymore. He's not using them. And yours are still leaking from that incident in the marsh. So you kneel, awkwardly, and begin to unlace them. They come off with a sickening squelch. There's blood inside. Of course there is. You gag. You still take them. They're better than yours. Maybe. You move to another body, carefully. This one's fresher. Still warm. His sword is nicer. Less rust, better grip. You pry it from his hand, fingers stiff with rigor mortis. He twitches. You drop it and leap back. But he doesn't move again. You collect the sword. Try not to think about it. Further on, someone finds a necklace. Another, a flask of wine. You find a small coin pouch. It jingles. You open it. 3 coins. Enough to trade for a bit of meat. Maybe bread, if the merchant isn't a sociopath. You take it. You don't hesitate this time. Morality is a concept for people who aren't dying in dirt. Eventually, the pile of dead becomes a blur. They stop looking like people. They become gear repositories. You check for rings, belts, anything of value. You no longer feel guilty. You feel tired. As the sun sets, the looting slows. Fires are lit. The wounded moan in rhythm. And you sit on a rock with your new sword, your slightly improved boots, and a vague, sour taste in your mouth that might never go away. You whisper a prayer, not because you believe it'll help, but because you hope someone's listening, even if he's looking the other way. Night falls, and with it comes a kind of silence. Not the peaceful, lullaby kind. More the heavy, expectant silence of too many unspoken things sitting in the dark. Around you, the camp rustles, armor clinks, someone groans, a horse wheezes like it's dying, and might be. But the shouting stopped. The screaming's over. For now. You should sleep. Your body demands it. Your knees throb like they've been personally cursed. Your back feels like it's been hit with a log. Your eyes are dry. Your feet? You stopped feeling them around midday, which is probably not great. You peel off your boots anyway and immediately regret it. The smell escapes like a demon, and your sock, if you can still call it that, peels off in what layers. You lie down on the ground. There's no mattress. No pillow. Just packed dirt, old straw, and a thin wool cloak that smells like onions and old fear. The person next to you is already asleep, snoring like a sick donkey. You hope he rolls the other way. He probably won't. You curl onto your side. It's cold, but the kind of cold that's sticky and humid, clinging to your skin like old soup. You wrap your cloak around your shoulders and press your head into your bag. It's lumpy. Something inside jabs your temple. Probably your spare knife. Maybe a rock. You don't care anymore. Sleep doesn't come easy. Your mind is loud. Images flash. The man you stabbed today, the blood, the blank eyes. The sound of someone begging in a language you didn't understand. The child holding a stick who screamed when he saw you. The priest who said this was all righteous. You roll over. A bug crawls across your neck. You slap it. Mississippi. It vanishes into your hair. Fantastic. You try again. You close your eyes, listen to the camp around you. Someone is sobbing quietly. Someone is mumbling a prayer. Someone is vomiting. You hear the squelch and the retching and try to pretend it's just wind. A dog howls in the distance. Or a wolf. Or something worse. You don't want to think about what's out there. You don't even want to think about what's here. You breathe slowly. In. Out. Try to slow your heart. Try to ignore the rash spreading along your leg, the throbbing in your finger, the fact that your helmet has developed its own distinct, mushroom-like ecosystem. You remind yourself you're alive, which is more than can be said for a lot of people today. You whisper another prayer, or maybe just a curse. Then, slowly, Your mind starts to drift. The aches dull. The night presses in, thick and sour. You hover on the edge of sleep. Not rest. Not peace. Just escape. The best you can hope for. You dreamt of bread. Not the hard, sour kind you've been gnawing on like a desperate rodent for the past 2 weeks. No, real bread. Warm. Soft. With butter. Butter so golden and rich it made your dream self weep. You were just about to take a bite when the scream rips through the night like a torn veil. You jolt awake, heart hammering. The dream evaporates instantly, replaced by darkness, confusion, and the acidic tang of fear crawling up your throat. Around you, men are sitting up, grabbing weapons, blinking blearily into the shadows. Someone's crying. Someone else is already running. You fumble for your sword, not because you think it'll help, but because not holding something sharp right now feels like a mistake. Another scream. Closer this time. Not the heroic battle cry kind. The other kind. The dying kind. This is not how I thought my night would go. Kind. You scramble to your feet, cloak tangled around your legs, and try to make sense of the chaos. Torchlight flickers. Shadows dance. There's shouting in multiple languages, some angry, some terrified. Then you catch a word that cuts through it all. Raiders. You blink. Raiders? Here? Yes. Here. Because in Crusader camps, there's no such thing as a truly safe night. Not when you're surrounded by local populations who hate your guts, rival armies who want your loot, and your own fellow crusaders who've had just enough wine and not nearly enough morality. You stumble toward the noise, sword in hand, feet slapping the dirt. You pass a man with an arrow sticking out of his shoulder. He looks at you, glassy-eyed, and says something you don't understand. You nod anyway and keep going. You see a tent on fire. A horse gallops past, riderless and screaming. Can horses scream? Apparently yes. You didn't need to know that. Finally, you reach the edge of the camp, or what used to be the edge. A few dozen figures, cloaked and fast, are darting through the chaos. Slashing. Stealing. Vanishing into the darkness like wraiths. One of them turns toward you. You raise your sword. He raises his. You both freeze for a second, long enough to realize that neither of you wants to do this. But the moment passes. He lunges. You parry. Spikes fly. You swing back. Mississippi. He ducks. Then he's gone, melting back into the night. You breathe hard. Adrenaline buzzing. Sweat pouring. Your legs are trembling. A horn blares. Late but loud. Reinforcements arrive. Actual knights, polished, shouting orders. Too late to stop most of the damage, but early enough to look important. The raiders scatter. The fire crackles. The camp starts to calm, if that word still means anything. You walk back to your bedroll. Or where it was. Now it's a smoking hole and half a boot. You sigh. Lay down in the dirt. You don't sleep again that night. Morning arrives like a punch to the face. The sun slinks over the horizon with smug indifference, casting long shadows across the wreckage of last night's raid. You sit up slowly, back creaking like an old ship, and immediately regret regaining consciousness. Your mouth tastes like rust and ashes. Your cloak is damp, either from dew or some deeply unfortunate bodily fluid. You don't check. You've reached a point where knowing only makes it worse. Across the camp, people are already moving. There's no moment of silence. No respectful pause. Crusaders are busy. There's armor to tighten, wounds to wrap, and somehow, breakfast to scavenge. Today's breakfast is a chunk of something brown, solid, and technically edible. You're not sure what it is. Possibly root vegetable. Possibly shoe. You gnaw at it like a starving animal, trying not to think about the fact that your fingers still smell like blood from last night. Then the bell rings. A solemn, slow toll. One of the priests, the one who always looks like he's just seen a ghost and maybe was one in a previous life, is standing beside a pit. A large one, freshly dug. People begin to gather. You don't want to go, but you do. Not because of honor or duty, just curiosity. You wander over with your half-chewed breakfast still in hand. You stand in a loose crowd of hollow-eyed, dirty-faced men, all staring into a trench filled with bodies. Some are wrapped in cloaks, others not. There wasn't enough cloth. The priest mumbles a prayer. It's the same one he said yesterday, and the day before. He stopped using names. There are too many. He just says souls, and hopes God is paying attention. A knight coughs and spits. Another crosses himself. One of the bodies twitches. Everyone flinches. Then it stops. You wonder if any of them got the funeral they wanted. Or any funeral at all. You wonder if you will. The priest finishes. A few men shovel dirt onto the bodies. Others walk away before he's even done. One man mutters, "Waste of time." Another says nothing at all and just stares, unmoving, eyes empty. You look down at the pit one last time, then back at your breakfast. You're no longer hungry. You toss the chunk of mystery meat into the fire and walk back to what's left of your gear. Another day begins. Just like the last one. Just like the next one. Death is just another part of the morning routine now. You try to pray. Not because you feel particularly holy this morning, you don't, but because everyone else is doing it, and not joining in would make you look suspicious. Or worse, heretical. You kneel beside a dozen others in the dirt. The priest, yes, the same hollow-eyed one from the funeral, stands at the front, muttering Latin that sounds like it's being squeezed through a sock. His voice is hoarse, his robes are filthy, and his eyes have checked out. He's doing this on autopilot now. You bow your head. You don't close your eyes. Not because you're rebellious. You just don't trust anyone behind you. He starts the prayers, chants about divine purpose, about righteous suffering, about the cleansing fire of holy war. And you realize something. This isn't prayer. It's marketing. You're being sold a narrative that your sores mean you're chosen, that your fevers are sacred, and that the stomach cramps you woke up with are actually proof you're spiritually evolving. You glance around. Some of the men are crying. Real tears. Others stare blankly. One's muttering the words under his breath like he believes every syllable could keep him alive for one more day. But you feel numb. Because last night, you stabbed a man who looked your age. And this morning, a priest is telling you that was good. That it pleased God. That your hands are cleaner than they feel. He finishes the prayer with a rousing Amen. And everyone echoes it, more out of muscle memory than conviction. Then the sermons begin. Oh yes, sermons. Because nothing prepares you for battle quite like being reminded that your sins are probably killing you faster than your enemies. That plague is punishment. That hunger is divine trial. That maybe, just maybe, if you die today, you'll wake up in paradise. Maybe. But only if you stop doubting. Stop asking questions. And definitely stop thinking about the child you saw crying in that burnout village 2 days ago. You're handed a relic, a splinter of what claimed to be from the true cross. You hold it reverently. It pricks your palm. You bleed slightly. You wonder how many other palms this thing has poked. The priest blesses your sword. You feel nothing. He splashes holy water. It lands on your nose. It stings. You're not sure why. Afterward, everyone stands. Some seem lighter, like they'd been cleansed. You just feel tired, still itchy, still hungry, still human. Faith, it seems, is less about answers and more about surviving the questions. You strap your sword back on and march forward anyway. There aren't many women in the camp, not officially anyway. The ones who are here fall into categories so narrow and so cruel you could count them on a single, blistered hand. Wives, widows, washerwomen, or the kind of women men don't talk about during morning prayers, but very much seek out after nightfall. You pass a group near the edge of camp. One stirs a pot of something soupy over a fire. Another is rinsing blood from a linen cloth, or trying to. It's not working. Red never truly leaves in this century. They glance at you. Not flirtatiously. Not fearfully. Just appraisingly. Like you're another animal in the menagerie. Not a threat, but not useful either. They've seen hundreds of men like you. Thousands. They know how many last the march. And how many leave their boots behind. One of them has a child. You're not sure where it came from. No one ever is. Women on crusade? Technically allowed. Spiritually tolerated. Practically ignored. They cook, carry, clean, care, until they get in the way. Then they're blamed for everything. Storms. Defeats. Plague. The price of onions. You once overheard a bishop say, "The devil enters through the skirts." You didn't ask what that meant. You didn't want to know. The women sleep separately, when they sleep at all. Some share tents with soldiers. Some stay with the washer wagons. Some just vanish when things get violent. Which is often. The men speak of them in whispers. Or jokes. Or confessions. Depends on how close they are to death that day. You've heard the stories. So have they. There's a healer among them. Midwife, technically. But she knows more than most of the battlefield doctors. You saw her stitch a man's leg without flinching while he screamed and thrashed. Then she slapped him for moving. He thanked her. You wonder how many women marched voluntarily. How many were dragged. How many just followed a brother, or a husband, or a chance to escape something worse back home. One woman, an archer's widow, now carries his bow. She doesn't speak. She just stands on the ridge, watching the road ahead. You've never seen her blink. Women fight here. Not always with blades. Not openly. But they fight in ways the men don't see, with whispers and glances, and the kind of quiet strength that's built from years of being expected to smile while bleeding. You nod at one as you pass. She nods back. Neither of you says anything, because in this world, words are dangerous, especially between the wrong people, at the wrong time, in front of the wrong priest. Still, for a moment, you see something. Not faith, not fear, just mutual exhaustion, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of respect. You carry a bone in your pocket. Not yours. Not anyone's you knew. At least, you hope not. It was sold to you by a monk who claimed it once belonged to Saint Bartholomew. Or maybe Saint Balthazar. The name changed halfway through the sale. Either way, it's small, brittle, and you're pretty sure it's actually chicken. But still, you keep it. Because here, on the road to Jerusalem, facts are negotiable. Survival, however, isn't. You aren't alone in this. Everyone has something. A splinter of the true cross. A tooth of St. Cuthbert. A vial of holy sand from the very hills where Christ probably coughed once. Most of it is fake. All of it is precious. One man swears his pouch of St. Agnes toe ash saved him from an arrow. He fails to mention the arrow hit someone else. Another sleeps with a carved wooden Mary tucked into his boot. Says she whispers to him. Everyone avoids that guy. You pass a line of crusaders rubbing dirt on their swords. Holy earth, someone claims. From Bethlehem. It's from a ditch. But they look calmer afterward. The priests don't help. They bless coins. Sell indulgences. Recommend relics like traveling salesmen with divine business cards. You've seen men fight over a supposed thread from Christ's robe. It looks suspiciously like pig twine. Still, you keep your bone. Because superstition is cheaper than hope. And quieter than doubt. You find chimes in unexpected places. A carved fish on a helmet. A string of beads around a gauntlet. Symbols chalked onto tent flaps. Little wards against disease, bad luck, bad weather, and other unnamed things that prowl the night. Even the hardened knights, the ones who speak only of duty and steel, carry something tucked inside their armor. A scrap of cloth. A lock of hair. A lucky coin worn so smooth it looks like a blister. You once asked a fellow crusader if he believed in saints. He shrugged and said, "Not really. But I don't want to be the only one who didn't." And that's the truth, isn't it? In this place of filth, war, and wandering, belief isn't always about faith. Sometimes it's just about not being the only one unprotected. You touch the bone in your pocket again. It's warm from your skin. You say a quiet prayer, just in case. You don't know if it works, but it doesn't hurt. Yet. You hear the bell again. But this time, it's not for prayer, or breakfast, or even mass. This time, it's for justice. You follow the sound, like everyone else. Not because you want to, but because it's either this or mucking latrines. And you've already used your turn for that this week. So you drift toward the center of camp, where the makeshift gallows waits like a bored executioner. The accused stands beneath it. Yum. Thin. Dirt on his face. Rope already around his neck. His hands shake, slightly, but he's not crying. Not yet. You ask what he did? No one knows. Some say theft. Others say desertion. One man mutters something about looking the wrong way at a bishop's meal. The truth doesn't matter. He was caught. Someone with a shiny helmet and a scroll said, "Guilty." And now here he is, waiting to die in front of a crowd that stinks of sweat, mold, and mild curiosity. A priest reads a few words. They're in Latin. No one understands them, including the priest. Then the knight, the one with the big voice and bigger chin, steps forward. He gives a speech. It's about order, discipline, God's will. How sin spreads like rot unless it's cut out. Halfway through, someone sneezes loudly. No one says, "Bless you." Then they pull the rope. The boy kicks. His boots dangle. His face contorts into something you don't want to remember later. His body jerks once, twice, then stills. Everyone stares. Then, as if on cue, they begin to walk away. Back to sharpening swords, boiling stew, patching holes in tents. Just another morning. Just another warning. Justice in Crusader times is flexible. Sometimes it's a noose. Other times it's 20 lashes with a belt made from dried ox hide. You've seen a man whipped until he passed out for stealing a crust of bread. You've seen another walk free after stabbing someone because he was the son of someone important. The rules change depending on who's watching and who's judging and how recently that judge was fed. There's jail, technically. A wooden box near the horses. It smells like manure and contains both kinds. Mostly it's used for drunks, heretics, and anyone who lost a bet with the wrong knight. And then there's divine judgment, trial by ordeal. One man was made to carry a red-hot iron bar for 10 paces. If his hands healed cleanly after 3 days, he was innocent. He wasn't. You start to notice that justice here has less to do with guilt and more to do with timing. You keep your head down. You speak only when spoken to. You share your rations even when you don't want to. You pray at the right times. Not because you're holy, but because you've seen what happens when people stop pretending. You walk past the gallows. The body still swings slightly. You don't look up. You hear it all the time. God wills it. But what God really seems to will is horses. They get everything. Better food. Cleaner water. Actual shelter. You sleep on a damp sack next to a man who snores like a dying walrus, while a war horse gets its own tent and a personal groom with fewer fleas than you. You walk past them every day, the mounts of knights and commanders, towering beasts with haunches like carved stone and eyes full of ancient, quiet judgment. They stomp the dirt, toss their manes, and get fed carrots while you chew moldy bread and pretend it tastes like dreams. You know where you stand. When a man dies, people mutter a prayer and steal his boots. When a horse dies, they cry. They bury it. Sometimes with flowers. You once saw a knight sob into his horse's mane after a skirmish. Then he wiped his nose and barked at a soldier to clean his blade faster. And the equipment, oh, the equipment. A horse's saddle is padded with actual lambskin. Your cloak? Woven straw and one particularly soft rat. Their armor is polished daily. Your chainmail hasn't been cleaned since the second moon of the campaign. It smells like what pennies and decisions you regret. And yet, you respect the horses. Because they carry everything. Not just men, but food. Supplies. Sometimes entire tents. Sometimes unconscious crusaders. One saved a man from an ambush by kicking a Saracen so hard he saw God. They are trained, loyal, and in many cases smarter than their riders. You've seen one refuse to cross a bridge that collapsed 2 hours later. The knight called it cowardice. You called it foresight. The knights, of course, get the biggest, best ones. Destriers. Warhorses. Preachers bred to crush enemies and occasionally trample you if you get too close during feeding time. Your job? Stay out of the way. Don't spook them. Don't touch them. One man tried to pet a knight's horse. He's missing a finger now. You, if you're lucky, might be assigned a pack mule, which is just a horse with depression and a vendetta. Yours bit you last week and has been fighting dramatically ever since. You're convinced it's intentional. Still, you dream. Not of being a knight. Not anymore. But of riding. Of not having to walk every day with your feet slowly disintegrating inside your boots. Of sitting, swaying gently, high above the mud, the filth, the blood. You dream of a horse of your own. Even a small one. Even a smelly one. One that doesn't try to kill you daily. But you wake up the next morning and walk. Because the only saddle you're ever getting is imaginary. And it chafes anyway. It's dinner time. Which is a generous word for what's about to happen. You line up with your bowl, or cup, or helmet, or whatever vaguely clean object you can convince to hold something wet for 5 seconds without leaking. Ahead of you, the queue snakes around the campfire. Men shuffle forward like condemned souls. No one speaks. Everyone stares into the pot. The pot bubbles. Not in a cheerful, soup commercial kind of way. More like a swamp that made a wish to be stew and got halfway there before giving up. It's brown. Chunky. Oily on top. And it smells complex. A mix of burned onions, rotting meat, and a whisper of something sweet, which is terrifying. You hear whispers behind you. Someone says the meat came from a pig. Someone else swears it was goat. A third man, more sunburned than skin at this point, leans in and says, "Whatever it was, it walked on 4 legs and died ugly." That's the closest thing to confirmation you'll get. You reach the front. The cook, an enormous man with 1 eyebrow and 2 teeth, scoops you a ladleful. It slops into your bowl with a wet, congealing splat. He gestures you away. You sit. You stare. You poke the food. It jiggles. You swear one of the lumps blinked. You try a bite. The texture is violent, chewy, then soggy, then oddly crisp. You stop chewing. You swallow. You regret every decision that led to this moment. Your stomach, already cautious, sends up a formal protest. You ignore it. You take another bite. And here's the thing, it does fill you. With calories. With vague nutrients. With questions about the fragility of human dignity. You've had worse. Once, back near Tripoli, someone tried to make a stew out of horse meat and spoiled lentils. 3 men died. 4 passed out. 1 claimed it opened his third eye. He hasn't blinked since. Tonight's mystery meat is mild by comparison. Until an hour later, your stomach starts rumbling. Not the hungry kind. The something's moving kind. You feel heat in your belly. Pressure. Regret. A gurgle so loud the man next to you asks if you brought a drum. Then it hits. Like divine punishment from both ends. You sprint to the latrine pit. Or as close as you can get without tripping over another sick crusader. You squat. You pray. You release. You question your life choices. You vow to never eat again. You know you will. Back at camp, the fire crackles merrily. Someone's already gone for seconds. You lie on your back, curled slightly, a thin sheen of sweat covering your face, wondering if this is how you die, not by sword, or plague, or holy martyrdom, but by goat stew and a slightly undercooked turnip. There's a sound you've come to dread. It's not the clang of swords or the scream of the wounded. It's thunder. Because nothing, in this crusade hits quite like the weather. You wake up to a sky the color of regret. Dark, churning clouds roll in like an army of their own, heavy and slow, just looking for something to ruin. The wind picks up. Your cloak flaps like a dying bat. A drop lands on your forehead. Then another. And then the heavens open like an overexcited latrine. It's not a gentle spring rain. It's biblical. Thick, cold, and fast, hammering the earth in sheets. Within minutes, everything is soaked. Your clothes, your gear, your last remaining piece of dry bread, your soul. Your boots fill with water. Your tunic sticks to your skin like a wet rag that's been boiled in filth. Mud climbs up your legs like a jealous lover. You slip. You fall. You get up. You fall again. Someone screams at the sky. Another man just sits down and refuses to move. He disappears into the mud slowly, like a sad statue being reclaimed by the earth. Tents collapse. Campfires hiss and vanish. Horses scream and panic. The priest prays louder, like maybe shouting at God will convince him to turn off the faucet. It doesn't. And if it's not rain, it's heat. Oh yes, that brand of heat, the dry, searing kind that makes your armor feel like a slow-cooking torture device. The kind that turns your sweat into a crust, your mouth into a desert, and your thoughts into soup. You've learned to ration your curses. Then there's wind. Sharp and relentless. It blows dust into your eyes, your mouth, your food. It turns cloaks into sails and your skin into a dry, itchy battlefield. You once saw a man lose his hat, run after it, trip, and break 2 ribs. The hat never came back. Snow? Rare, but not impossible. It arrives like a joke. One morning you wake up and everything is white. Beautiful for 2 minutes. Then your fingers freeze. Your water skin becomes a club. And your nose refuses to stop dripping. No matter the season, the climate finds a way to break you. You once heard a bishop say that suffering brought you closer to God. If that's true, then by now, you and God are practically roommates. You just wish he'd chip in with a blanket or 2. So you press on, through storms, through droughts, through weather so absurd it feels personal. You no longer ask if the day will be nice. You ask only how much it will hurt. Time passes differently here. Not in the romantic, savor the moment way, no. More like, is this still Tuesday? Followed by, wait, wasn't it Tuesday 3 days ago? You are officially stuck in the long middle. That endless stretch of crusading where nothing really happens. No battles, no miracles, no grand speeches, just walking, waiting, rotting in your armor. A slow descent into tedium, filth, and philosophical despair. You trudge across hills, then more hills, then rocky plains. Occasionally, a tree. Once a dog. The dog looked confused. So did you. Your feet blister. Then the blisters blister. Your legs ache. Your back has opinions now. Sharp, stabby ones. You carry your pack, your sword, your shield, your doubt. The silence is loud. You'd think boredom would be a relief after all the chaos. But out here, it's a special kind of torture. There's nothing to distract you from the smell of your socks, the itch of your lice, or the fact that you're starting to forget what home looks like. You try talking to fellow crusaders. It goes badly. One man just grunts. Another hasn't spoken in days, not because he's fasting, but because he says God told him to. Shut up and listen. You're not sure if that was literal or metaphorical. You stop asking. You try singing. Someone tells you to stop. You try praying. Your voice cracks halfway through. Eventually, you just hum to yourself, quietly, to fill the void. Even your enemies seem bored. You haven't seen a Saracen in days. Not even an arrow in the distance. It's as if they've collectively decided you're not worth the effort right now. Which honestly, fair. The nights are worse. Long cold. Too quiet. You lie on your back, staring at a sky full of stars you can't name, thinking about how many of them are looking down and saying, "Yup, still stupid down there." You try to sleep. You fail. Your mind races with questions. What day is it? How long until the next city? What if Jerusalem isn't even real? No one tells you anything. Leadership? Gone vague. The commanders argue. The priests chant. The maps are increasingly theoretical. You suspect you're being led by a man who couldn't find north with divine intervention. So you walk, and walk, and walk, until your thoughts grow so quiet that you forget you used to be a person with hobbies, a name, maybe even dreams. Now you're just a moving sack of wet wool and dull steel, trying not to die before lunchtime. Still no sign of Jerusalem. But hey, at least you're getting your steps in. Let's talk about the air. Not in a poetic way. Not crisp mountain breezes, or the scent of wild thyme. No. The air you breathe on crusade is less a gentle element, and more a full-body experience, like being hugged by a compost heap. You smell it before you open your eyes each morning, before your feet hit the ground, before your brain fully remembers who and what and where you are. It hits you in waves. First, the smell of you. You haven't bathed in, well, no one's keeping track. Your sweat has turned into something new, not just salt and grime, but a living, evolving entity. It's tangy. It's present. It has its own gravity. Then comes your clothes. Damp wool. Old leather. Mildew. That one patch on your tunic that smells faintly of cheese for reasons you don't want to explore. Now your companions. The man next to you hasn't changed his shirt since Antioch. It used to be white. It is now brown. With stripes. Not sewn stripes. Organic ones. His breath could stun a donkey. His boots are a chemical weapon. Someone behind you has trench foot. You know this because it smells like meat, and not the good kind. The found behind a tavern in summer kind. He limps. Everyone gives him space. Not out of kindness. Just self-preservation. The camp smells of smoke. Not nice smoke. Acrid, eye-watering. Did someone burn horsehair again? Smoke. There's always a fire going, but the wood is damp, the kind that screams when it burns, and somehow produces more stink than heat. Add to that the latrines, or as you now call them, Hell's Mouth. Pits dug just deep enough to pretend the stench won't crawl back out. They do. The wind shifts, and suddenly you're tasting the sins of 50 men in one breath. And food. Yes, food has a smell. When it's good, it smells like onions and fat. When it's bad, and it's usually bad, it smells like regret sautéed in old goat well. Once, a pot of stew went off mid-meal. The noise it made was wet. The smell? Despair simmered. Sometimes it rains. Then everything gets worse. Wet mud, wet dogs, wet everything. The smells get activated. Like someone pressed a cursed button and released every odor at once. You can't escape it. It seeps into your skin, into your dreams, into your soul. You start to miss bad smells from home. Cow dung, fish markets, your uncle's feet. Simple, innocent stinks. But here, every breath is a gamble. And you can't hold your breath forever. It doesn't happen the way you imagine. There's no slow motion moment, no swell of victorious music, no holy light shining down on your trembling hands. There's just the sound of metal hitting flesh and a sort of thud, like dropping a sack of wet flour. You barely remember how it started. One moment you were marching, the next someone shouted. Then came the chaos, spears, hooves, smoke. You swung your sword without thinking, purely on instinct. Not skill, not bravery. Instinct. And then there he was, in front of you. You locked eyes for maybe a second. He looked young, scared. Not that different from you. But his sword was up. His body was moving. So you moved faster. You didn't aim. You just swam. You felt it connect. There was resistance, then give. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He fell. Slowly, then all at once. You stood over him. Your heart pounding so hard it blurred your vision. Your sword trembling in your grip. You waited for something to happen, a voice from the sky, a glow, a feeling. But all you felt was nausea. You looked down. His tunic was stained. His hand still gripped his weapon. His eyes were open. You wanted to close them. You didn't. You wanted to say something. You didn't know what. He didn't move. Someone shouted behind you. Keep moving. You did. Because you had to. Because stopping meant dying. Because you couldn't let the man behind you see you crying. Later, when it was quiet again, you sat behind a rock and threw up. No one saw. Or if they did, they said nothing. The next day, you told yourself he was the enemy. That he would have done the same to you. that it was him or you, that God willed it. You repeated it like a prayer. But when you sleep, you see his face. You always will. No matter how many more come after, how many battles you survive, how many victories you march through, he will be the one who returns. Again and again. Eyes open. Silent. You killed someone. And the crusade continues anyway. It starts low. Barely a whisper at first. A soft, murmuring hum that seeps into your dream of warm soup and dry socks. You roll over, pull your cloak tighter, and tell yourself it's nothing. A breeze. A distant stream. A dying goat. Then it gets louder. Voices. Echoing. Harmonizing. Latin. You open one crusty eye. The monks are at it again. There they stand, 12 hooded figures arranged in a circle like medieval alarm clocks sent straight from God's patience-testing department. Their heads bowed, hands folded, sandals firmly planted in the cold mud, chanting their way into the pre-dawn gloom. Gloria in excelsis Deo. You groan. It's not that you hate religion. You've come to terms with it more or less. It's just that you haven't slept properly in, possibly your entire adult life, and now, just as your bones are starting to forgive you for yesterday's stupidity, Gregorian a cappella starts piping directly into your dreams. You wrap your cloak around your ears. It doesn't help. The sound travels, bounces off tents, crawls into every crevice. It finds you. Because holy harmony is apparently inescapable. You consider telling them to stop. You don't. First, because they're monks. And while they technically don't carry weapons, they do carry social immunity. Insult one, and suddenly you're fasting for 3 days as penance. Second, because they like waking up this early. It's part of their monastic rule. Something about humility, or suffering, or some other virtue that involves ruining your REM cycle. The worst part? Some people join in. You hear a few half-hearted voices croaking along from nearby tents. One man starts clapping. Another adds a poorly timed harmony that sounds like a dying rooster. Someone shushes him. He keeps going. You've grown used to a lot on this crusade. Hunger. Fear. Open wounds. Creeping rot in your left foot. But nothing tests your will to live quite like being serenaded at sunrise by men who haven't smiled since Pope Urban declared this whole mess a good idea. Still, you get up. Because once the monks start, you know the day has begun. And there's no going back. You trudge past them on your way to the latrines. One makes eye contact mid-him and smiles beatifically. You resist the urge to kick him. Because despite everything, you still want to make it to heaven. And you're not entirely sure they're not in charge of the guest list. There are many kinds of loss on crusade. Friends. Dignity. The feeling in your left toes. But nothing compares to the day the wine runs out. It begins subtly. A whisper at breakfast. Last barrel tapped. Someone shrugs. Someone else scoffs, confident that more will appear, as it always does. Wine flows like God's mercy, right? Wrong. By noon, the whispers have become rumors. By evening, full-on panic. Men who laughed this morning are now pacing the camp, muttering and checking every wagon as if wine might be hiding beneath the spare axles. You hear someone praying, not for victory, or survival, or forgiveness. For Merlot. Even the priests look nervous. Because while they preach temperance and humility, they still pour a suspiciously large goblet during Mass. And now they're eyeing the sacramental stockpile like wolves near a pantry. You sit with your squad, each of you nursing the final dregs of last night's flask. It's lukewarm. A little sour. Possibly adulterated with something that was once a plum. It is the best thing you've ever tasted. You savor it like a dying man kissing daylight. By the next morning, it's official. The wine is gone. Gone, gone. No more deliveries. No secret stash. The quartermaster, previously regarded as a boring lump with poor facial hair, now finds himself the center of hostile attention. His tent is surrounded. Men shout. One weeps openly. You see a knight offer 3 coins and a prayer for half a cup. The quartermaster tells him to drink water. There's silence. Cold, horrified silence. Water? Water? That unholy swamp juice? That lukewarm disease smoothie? You stare at your own water skin, suspiciously. It slashes in your hand. You open it, sniff. It smells like wet metal and faintly effete. You close it again. Decide you're not that thirsty. A few try beer. It's thin. Weak. Foamy like someone sneezed into a mug. One man suggests boiling herbs for flavor. He is promptly ignored. Evening falls. Camp is too quiet. Without wine, there are no songs. No laughing. No boasts or half-remembered hymns shouted at the stars. Just silence. And the distant sound of someone trying to wring flavor out of a boiled sock. You sit with your comrades, passing around a single raisin someone claimed used to be in wine. It's a joke. Probably. You chew it anyway. It tastes like despair. Eventually, someone says, "Remember that night in Lyon? The tavern with the red stuff?" Everyone nods. No one smiles. The next day, someone suggests squeezing grapes. There are no grapes. Someone else tries fermenting goat milk. That man is no longer allowed near the cooking fire. And so you march on, sober, bitter, and slightly more aware of just how dull this whole holy mission feels without a slight buzz. There he goes again. Sir Etienne does something fancy, galloping through camp on a pure white horse that has somehow remained spotless for the entire crusade. His armor gleams. His surcoat is embroidered. His hair looks brushed. You didn't even know people still brushed. He nods at you as he passes. You nod back, because not nodding gets you a fine. Or worse, a lecture. Sir Etienne has not fought in a single battle. Not really. He commands from the rear, which is noble speak for, sips wine and yells vague encouragement. You know this because you were at the front line, bleeding into your boots while Etienne discussed formation geometry with a fellow noble over a plate of salted boar. You've carried water. You've dug trenches. You've cooked meals, patched tents, and once pulled a screaming monk out of a thorn bush. Etienne? He once sprained his wrist flicking bread at a servant. And yet, he'll be the one remembered. He has a banner. An actual banner. With his family crest and everything. It flaps majestically in the breeze while you hold your own pants up with twine. He has a squire. A boy whose entire job is to polish his boots, fetch his lunch, and whisper how brave he looks in the sunlight. He has 4 changes of clothes. 4. You have 2, and one of those is currently being used as a pillow by a man with questionable hygiene and a chronic snoring issue. The nobles, they dine separately. In a circle of tents near the nicest latrine. With guards. And napkins. You once saw one using a spoon. You nearly wept. They receive letters. Sealed. From home. From lovers. From kings. You tried to write once. Your letter ended up as kindling. The man who took it had one eye and used the envelope as a napkin. But here's the real kick. When this crusade is over, assuming you live that long, they'll return home triumphant. There will be parades. Songs. Paintings of Sir Etienne looking dramatically heroic atop a hill he never climbed. You'll be lucky to keep your teeth. but you've learned the rules. When they speak, you nod. When they err, you apologize. When they brag, you clap. And when they fall off their horse, which does happen because they are often drunk, you help them up and pretend you didn't see anything. Because nobles are like helmets, shiny, mostly useless, and prone to pinching. Still, you march behind them. Still, you chant the songs they write. Still, you carry the weight. Because in this crusade, as in life, credit is handed out by the people least likely to earn it. It was supposed to be a good day. Supplies had come in. Spirits were up. The monks had chanted a little less aggressively that morning. Someone even claimed they saw a pigeon, which meant, possibly, civilization was not completely extinct. Then came the meat. It arrived in a wagon, wrapped in burlap sacks and the kind of optimism only a starving army can muster. A soldier unwrapped the first slab and held it up like a trophy. Cheers went up. Hands clapped backs. Someone kissed the cook. No one asked questions. No one ever asks questions when meat shows up. But when the second slab came out, it was green. Not just a little off. Green. Not. That's how the light is hitting it. Green. No. It was the color of envy, pond scum, and the kind of mold that develops consciousness. It shimmered, slightly. It moved. Probably gas. You hope. Someone whispered. Maybe it's just a spice. Someone else whispered. Maybe it's penance. Someone third said nothing and started chewing. Because here's the thing. Hunger rewires the brain. The pipe that says, that's not safe, slowly dies. The pipe that says, but maybe if I roast it hard enough, gets promoted. So they cooked it. Over a large fire. With garlic. With dried herbs. With anything they could find to disguise the smell, which was somewhere between foot cream and sorrow. A thick, greasy smoke drifted through camp. You tried not to breathe too deeply. Dinner was served. You took a piece. You didn't want to. But you did. Because if you didn't eat, someone else would. And you might not get another chance. And because you were so hungry, your stomach had started sending you dreams about chewing on your own boots. You bit down. The texture was wrong. Soft. Then firm. Then soft again. It squeaked. It tasted like salt, decay, and a faint tang of lemon, which was confusing because lemons hadn't been seen in weeks. You swallowed. And you waited. The silence around the fire was reverent. Holy. Then came the first burp. Then the first groan. Then a sound no digestive system should ever make. You made it to the latrine. Barely. You spent the night curled on your side, listening to your comrades scream and moan and make promises to God they definitely won't keep. By morning, 6 men were still in the pit. 1 was praying. 2 were sleeping in shifts so they wouldn't die alone. Someone said, "Next time, just feed us the rats." Everyone agreed. The path ahead isn't clear. It's not blocked by walls or enemy soldiers. It's not the terrain, though the mud does suck at your boots like it wants to keep a piece of you. No, it's blocked by bodies. Dozens of them. Some fresh. Some less so. And you, along with hundreds of equally exhausted, bud-bitten men, are expected to keep walking. Not around. Not over. Through. The stench hits first. A wave of rot so dense it makes your eyes sting. You try breathing through your mouth. It's worse. Then you try not breathing at all, which works until the dizziness sets in and you trip over someone's rib cage. You don't scream. You barely flinch. Because this is normal now. Your boots crunch through broken bone and dried blood. You see things you can't describe, not because they're indescribable, but because your brain has decided not to love them. A man with no face. A woman with no hands. A child curled up, still holding a spoon. No one stops. Stopping would mean acknowledging it, mourning it, feeling something. So you march. And with every step you think, this is progress. This is the holy journey. This is what God wills. You look to your right. A knight has tied a scarf over his face. Not for plague. For the smell. His eyes are wide. Not with fear. With familiarity. He's done this before. You look to your left. A young man vomits and keeps walking. The vomit steams in the cold. It lands on someone's boot. No one says a word. One man starts humming at him. He's off key. It doesn't help. Eventually, the corpse is thin. The mud gets cleaner. The path flattens. You pretend this is a good sign. That this means you're closer to something. Closer to victory. Or salvation. Or at least the town with wine. You don't look back. You know what's behind you. A trail of broken humanity, left to the crows, the flies, the worms. And you're not far from joining them. But for now, you march. Because that's what crusaders do. They said this was a holy war. That by joining the crusade, you'd be doing God's work. That your sins would be wiped clean. That the church, with its towering cathedrals and golden chalices, was your spiritual home. Turns out, it's also your landlord, and your tax collector, and on some days, your personal travel agent for hell. You remember the sermon before you left. A bishop, standing on a high platform, his robes billowing, voice booming with divine confidence. "Go forth and reclaim the Holy Land," he cried. "God will reward you." Then his assistant handed out pledge forms. You were told to donate what you could. For the cause. For the church. For purification. They called it a contribution. You called it my last goat and half a chicken. And it didn't stop there. Once on the road, there were more demands. Indulgences, for instance. A little coin in exchange for a quicker route to heaven. You saw men trading family heirlooms for scraps of parchment with shaky Latin and a wax seal. It wasn't salvation. It was business. Priests traveled with you. Not for healing. Not for comfort. But to monitor. To assess. To collect. If you found a relic, it belonged to the church. If you looted something shiny, the church took its share. If you didn't give willingly, they explained it was for your soul's well-being. And who were you to argue? You once saw a monk bless a dead man's sword, then sell it to the next crusader in line. When questioned, he said, "It's already spiritually broken in." You want to be angry, but you also want forgiveness. Just in case. You never know when the coughing will start again, or when your feet will turn purple. Or when a Saracen arrow will finally find the one gap in your armor. So you pay. Not with joy. Not with faith. But with the understanding that heaven, like everything else here, comes with a receipt. You try not to look bitter. You kneel when told. You cross yourself at the right moments. You pretend not to notice when a priest wears silk while you sleep in mold. Because even out here, even covered in mud, lice, and regret, the church stands above you. Watching. Weighing. Waiting. You didn't plan to buy the tooth. It just happened. You were waiting in line for bandages. Your left shin had developed a strange purple rash in the shape of a chicken, and you thought, well, that probably isn't great. But before the healer could look at you, a man with wild eyes and a small wooden box stepped into the crowd. "Behold," he said, "the molar of St. George himself." Everyone paused. Not because anyone believed him, but because for a moment, something was happening that didn't involve digging, bleeding, or groaning. He opened the box. Inside, one yellowed lump of enamel, cradled in a velvet scrap that looked suspiciously like someone's undergarment. You stared. It was definitely a tooth. But was it a saint's tooth? Doubtful. For one thing, it had a cavity. Still, the man insisted. Touched it to your forehead, he said, and headaches vanish. Tuck it in your sock, he added, and your blisters will fade. Kiss it before battle, and you'll never be struck. You asked how much? He named a price. 2 coins in a crust of bread. You laughed. Then your rash itched again. The wind picked up. A monk sneezed near you. And suddenly, the idea of owning a small, possibly magic, very likely stolen tooth seemed reasonable. You paid him. He handed it over like it was made of gold. You tucked it into your pouch, unsure if you felt safer or just more gullible. Later that night you stared at it. It didn't glow, or hum, or twitch. It just sat there. You pressed it to your forehead. No change. Tucked it in your sock. The blister got worse. Kissed it before bed. You had a nightmare about rats. The next morning you showed it to a priest. He squinted. That's a horse tooth, he said. You stared at it. You stared at him. You stared at your blister, now slightly oozing. And you nodded. You didn't ask for your money back. You didn't argue. You didn't even feel angry. Because at this point in the crusade, disappointment is just another item in your pack. You still carry the tooth. Not because you believe, but because it's something to hold. Something that isn't sharp. Something that isn't heavy. And maybe, just maybe, you're a little too tired to care anymore. It starts with the flames. Just a flicker at first, a little orange wobble dancing over charred wood, licking at the air like it's trying to escape. You sit in front of it, legs folded awkwardly, cloak drawn tight around your shoulders, half a bowl of something beige cooling in your lap. And you stare. Not in awe, not in fear. Just because there is nothing else to do. The camp is quiet tonight. No raiders. No storms. No monks belting out their 4 a.m. Latin thunder chorus. Just the soft murmur of tired men chewing, whispering, or muttering prayers into the dark. And the fire. It crackles like it's trying to tell a story. You don't listen. You don't have to. You just watch. You watch the logs collapse inward, the sparks dance upward, the smoke drift sideways like it has somewhere better to be. You don't blink. Because the longer you watch, the more the world around you disappears. No more blisters. No more hunger. No more men groaning about boils. No smell of horse sweat and unwashed ambition. Just color and heat and silence. Someone behind you clears their throat. You don't turn. Someone farts. You don't flinch. Your name, once sharp and full of meaning, now feels distant. Like it belongs to a man you used to be. The one with dreams. Plans. Clean underwear. You shift your weight. The bowl in your lap slashes. You forgot it was there. You forgot you were holding it. You forgot you had hands. And for a moment, just a small one, that's okay. Because staring into a fire is the closest thing to peace you've had since the crusade started. It asks nothing of you. It judges nothing. It simply is. Destructive and comforting in equal measure. Just like the cause you marched for. You hear someone say your name. Softly. You blink. The fire blinks back. The world returns. The bowl is cold. Your legs are asleep. Your foot is damp and you don't want to know why. You look away from the fire. back into the reality of mud, steel, and rot. But part of you stays there, still staring, still burning, still forgetting. You're thirsty. Again. Always. The kind of dry where your tongue feels like old rope and your throat has developed a permanent rasp. You dream of rivers, of fountains, of someone handing you a cup that doesn't smell like feet. But here's the thing, water is everywhere, and absolutely nowhere. There's a stream nearby. You found it yesterday. You crouched beside it like a hopeful raccoon, cupped your hands and hesitated. Because the water was clear. Too clear. Which means you can see what's in it. The floating bits of leaf, the tadpole, the sliver of something unidentifiable that might have once had legs. You also see the sheen of oil across the surface, and the faint, meaty smell of something that definitely died upstream. Someone told you to boil it. You tried. The part you used was previously a helmet. Now it's a helmet again. You decided it tasted like iron for holy reasons. You try filtering it through cloth. The cloth is your sock. You try not to think about it. Some crusaders carry wine skins, once full, now mostly air. Others have flasks that used to hold vinegar, which now tastes like burning. You once saw a man bite into a melon just for the moisture. It wasn't ripe. He cried anyway. Then there's the official water supply. A wooden barrel that's been rolled across half of Asia Minor, filled, emptied, refilled, tipped over, used as a latrine once, by accident, and now sits near the campfire like an old, moldy god. The water inside tastes like wood and secrets. But you drink it. Because you have to. Even though it makes your stomach gurgle like a possessed frog. Even though it sometimes smells like wet dog. Even though you know that at least 3 people have dropped their fingers in it this week. Someone tries to collect rainwater. It works once. Then someone uses the top for patching a tent, and now the rain just laughs at you. You sip from your flask. You sip from a helmet. You sip from your own hands after wringing out a damp cloth. You lower your standards to the level of not chunky. And you keep going. Because thirst doesn't care about bacteria. Or logic. Or shame. And you've already survived worse. It came folded, dirt smudged, and tied with twine. The ink was faded. The seal was broken. But you recognized the handwriting even before you opened it. Jagged, nervous loops from someone who still presses too hard on the quill. It smelled like old wood and faintly of lavender. You hadn't smelled lavender in months. It hit you harder than it should have. You almost didn't read it. But of course you did. It was from your sister. Or your mother. Or your wife. The details don't matter. What matters is the voice. The quiet, soft way the words curled around each other. Full of hope and fear and baked in sadness. They asked if you were well. You almost laughed. They said they were praying for you. You stared at the word praying until the letters blurred. They described the harvest. The weather. How the neighbor's dog had puppies again. Useless information. Beautiful, useless information. The kind of thing you'd give your last coin to overhear in the mud of camp. And then, right at the bottom, they said they miss you. That they hoped this war would end soon. That they still left your place at the table. You folded the letter. You didn't cry. Not then. But your throat clenched. Your fingers trembled. You stared into the fire for a long time, letting the words sink like stones into the part of your chest you'd been trying to ignore for months. And then, you put it away. Some men read the letters again and again, folding and unfolding until the paper turns to gauze. They cling to every word, whispering the names aloud in the dark like spells. You don't. You read it once. Because you can't afford to read it twice. Because the second time, you'd start to believe you were still that person, the one with a home, a place, a name that didn't echo with blood. And then when the next skirmish comes, when the arrows start flying, your heart might hesitate. You can't afford hesitation. So the letter stays folded, buried deep in your satchel. Not close enough to read. Just close enough to remind you there's something on the other side of this war. Something that might still be waiting. If you make it. Every night, without fail, he starts talking. You never invited him. No one ever does. But he shows up, just as the fire hits that low, comfortable burn and everyone's begun the ancient rite of silently chewing whatever the cook's latest crime is. He wears a hood. Has one eye. The other, long gone, is covered by a piece of leather strapped tight to his brow. He smells like roasted garlic and vague theft. And his voice? Velvet and vinegar. He tells stories. Incredible ones. Unbelievable. And yet, no one ever tells him to stop. One night he claims he rode alongside Richard the Lionheart. Says the man once knocked a Saracen off his horse with a turnip. The king laughed like thunder, he says, then ate the turnip. Another night, he swears he saw an angel during the siege of Antioch. It glowed, he says, and whispered secrets about a hidden spring beneath the city. When asked why no one else saw it, he taps his eye patch and says, "Some visions aren't for both eyes." He's fought wolves, escaped witches, played dice with a bishop and won a donkey. You've never seen him fight. You're pretty sure his sword is made of wood. Once, during a sudden downpour, his boots leaked blue dye and his left leg turned green. He didn't notice. Or he did and decided it was lucky. No one believes a word of it. And yet, everyone listens. Because out here, in a world of real horror, dysentery, starvation, arrows, and unseasoned porridge, there's something oddly comforting about a lie told well. It makes the night softer, the fire warmer, the lice bite less. You once caught yourself smiling during one of his tales. Genuinely, without irony. Then immediately scowled to cover it up. Because smiling is dangerous. It reminds you that you're still human. Still, you listen. You nod in the right places. You laugh when he swears he kissed the Pope's daughter, which makes no sense on multiple levels, but whatever. You keep a straight face when he says he once used a dragon tooth to bribe a garden acre. Because for a moment you're somewhere else. Not in mud. Not in war. Not in a camp that smells like spoiled meat and burned hope. But in a story. Even a fake one. Especially a fake one. You don't remember when you lost them. The socks, that is. At some point between the third skirmish and that river crossing where someone's pack floated away, your last pair just gave up. Thread snapped. Holes widened. The right one vanished entirely. The left, you tried to patch with old linen and a prayer. Now you march barefoot inside your boots. You've discovered new realms of pain. Not sharp. Not dramatic. Just slow, creeping, constant. The kind that makes you wince with every step and contemplate cutting your feet off and starting fresh. You've tried everything. Wrapping cloth strips. Failed. Stuffing hay inside your boots. Molded to your toes and gave you a rash that spelled the word. Why? You tried prayer. Your feet answered by developing blisters on top of blisters, like stacked regrets. You now understand the term. Marching through hell. Very literally. The terrain isn't helping. Stones, sticks, sand, something that might be cactus. Every surface feels like it was handcrafted by a vengeful god who thinks your toes need to suffer for your sins. You don't walk anymore. You hobble. You lean on your spear like a crutch. You curse quietly with each step. You watch other men with socks, with envy so sharp it borders on criminal. You dream of socks. You fantasize about them. Clean, dry, blissful. You saw a knight throw his away once. Too damp, he said. You considered murder. No one talks about how important socks are. In the grand stories of crusade glory, there are no hymns for hosiery. But here, in the mud and blood, you know the truth. Socks are civilization. Without them, you're just meat in armor, slowly liquefying from the ankles down. Your feet, once loyal and round, now resemble pale bags of pain. The skin peels. The toes swell. One nail turned black 3 weeks ago and hasn't checked in since. Another toe is permanently crossed in protest. You asked a priest if feet could be possessed. He gave you a look and then blessed them anyway. Didn't help. And yet, you keep walking. Because there's no choice. Because socks aren't coming back. Because your feet are sad, yes, but they're yours. And they're still attached. For now. You were told it would be over in a week. 2 at most. Quick siege, the commander said. They'll surrender once they see us. Someone even packed a small flag for the victory march. That was 73 days ago. Now you live behind a wall of rocks, eating hard bread that tastes like chalk and sharing a single bucket with 14 other men. Not for soup. Not for water. For other things. You don't talk about the bucket. You don't make eye contact with it. It sits in the corner of your makeshift shelter like a silent witness to the breakdown of human dignity. The city you're besieging? Still standing. Their gates remain closed. Their archers still sharp. Every morning, they fire a few arrows just to remind you who's really in charge. One of those arrows recently carried a note. Still not impressed. Morale is complicated. Some men still talk of glory, of breaching the walls and claiming divine victory. Others talk to rocks. One guy named his fleas. You're not sure if he's joking. You don't ask. Food is rationed, which is generous, considering there's barely any to ration. You once saw 2 men nearly duel over a turnip. A raw turnip. The loser wept. The winner gave it a name. Water's worse. You boil it when you can, filter it through cloth when you can't. One man drank straight from a puddle. His stomach started making noises no stomach should ever make. He's still alive. Technically. The bucket? Still there. It's been emptied. Occasionally. You don't know where they take it. You don't want to know. The days blend together. Sieges that turns out aren't battles. They're waiting contests with dysentery. There's the occasional skirmish, sure, a few rocks thrown, a ladder propped up, a volley of arrows exchanged. But mostly, you sit and rot and pretend your boots still have soles. You write songs about mold. You count your remaining teeth. You fantasize about warm bread and socks. Once, you thought about tunneling under the wall. You got about 3 feet before realizing you were using a spoon and digging into solid rock. You gave up. The spoon bent. You kept it anyway. And still, the city holds. You don't know what's inside. Gold, maybe? Or wine? Or just people equally tired, staring back at you with the same dead eyes. But you keep watch. You hold your post. You guard the bucket. Because that's what sieging is. He was untouchable. Robes white as judgment, rings on every finger, voice like thunder filtered through sanctimony. The bishop never walked in mud. He glided. His tent was bigger than some villages. He had wine. He had Christians. He had servants whose only job was to nod at his sermons. And then, he had diarrhea. It began discreetly, a missed prayer, a hurried trip behind the latrine mound. Whispers started. No one said it aloud. Not yet. Because you don't just say the bishop's rear is under siege. That's how people get excommunicated. But by day 3, there was no hiding it. He missed Mass. Twice. His tent reeked of herbs and panic. The monks stopped chanting for him and started chanting at him. Loudly. Repeatedly. As if Latin volume could plug the problem. And somewhere, in every tired, blistered, lice-bitten soul in camp, a flicker of grim satisfaction took hold. Because let's be honest, the bishop hadn't exactly made friends. He preached about sin while eating pheasant, condemned greed while pocketing relics, told you to fast while he sampled his 5th course. And now, at last, the universe had pulled up a stool and said, "Your turn." Men still pretended to care. Out loud. "Oh no," they said, eyebrows high, lips twitching. "We must pray for him." They did not pray. They gossiped. Wildly. One man claimed the bishop's screams could be heard over 3 hills. Another swore he saw smoke rise from the latrine. A third, the one with the oddly honest eyes, said he saw the bishop sprint past his tent, trailing both incense and regret. You tried not to laugh. You failed. For 3 glorious days, the sermon stopped. No lectures. No threats. No lectures about threats. Just blessed silence and the occasional monk running from more mint leaves. Of course, he recovered. Eventually. Pale. Sweaty. Humbled, but not really. He gave a short sermon afterward. Something about God. Perseverance. God testing the faithful. You couldn't hear half of it because his voice cracked, and also because someone in the back kept giggling. He ended with a cough, a grimace, and a prayer. No one said amen. But everyone, felt just a little bit holier that day. Because for once, the divine played fair.